Chapter 10 covers the muscular system. The primary focus of this chapter is the identification of muscles, their location, origins, insertions, and actions. That is primarily going to be accomplished in lab, but there are a few concepts in this chapter we need to discuss before we move further. Skeletal muscles are simply the machines for movement. They always work in groups, and they always have to cross at least one joint. Muscles can pull on bones. They never push on anything. They only shorten and then go back to their original length. Skeletal muscle groups have different functions. Prime movers are the major force in a specific movement. The biceps brachii, for example, is the prime mover in elbow flexion. The antagonist is the muscle that opposes the movement of the prime mover. It helps regulate the prime mover and reverse its activity. The triceps brachii opposes elbow flexion. It is the prime mover in elbow extension. Synergists are muscles that help prime movers. They may either add a little extra force to the movement, or they reduce certain undesirable movements of the bones involved in the movement. Fixators are a special type of synergist. They immobilize the bone. We see this particularly in the muscles used for posture. We have to stabilize the joints, and that's what fixators do. When we name muscles, there are several criteria that are used. One is the location. For example, the temporalis would overlie the temporal bone. Sometimes we use the shape of the muscle. Delta is a triangular letter in the Greek alphabet. The deltoid muscle is in the shape of a triangle. Sometimes size is used as part of the name of a muscle. Maximus, minimus, longus, brevis tell you something about the size or shape of the muscle. We can also talk about fiber direction. Rectus fibers run straight, oblique fibers run diagonally. Muscles may have more than one origin, and we may use that as part of the name. Biceps has 2 origins, triceps 3, quadriceps 4. The attachment location is always very helpful when naming a muscle. The sternocleidomastoid originates at the sternum and the clavicle, cleido is for clavicle, and inserts at the mastoid process on the temporal bone. And then finally, we can incorporate the action of the muscle into its name. So you may have flexors, extensors, adductors, abductors, and so forth. Muscles will contract with different force and with different speed. There are 2 factors that contribute to muscle force and muscle speed. One is the arrangement of the fascicles in the muscles themselves, and the other is the type of lever system that is used by the muscles. As we look at fascicle arrangement, circular muscles are known as sphincters. They're going to close openings. Here the fascicles are arranged in concentric circles. We see these kinds of muscles around the eye and around the mouth. Convergent muscles are fan-shaped. All of the fascicles converge to a single tendon. We see this in the pectoralis major, a large fan-shaped muscle across your chest with all of the fascicles going to the one tendon that attaches this muscle to the humerus. If the fascicles run parallel to each other, then we have a strap-like muscle, like the sartorius, or we may have what's called a fusiform muscle. This is the kind of muscle you usually think of when you think of a muscle, that spindle-shaped muscle. In pinnate muscles, the fascicles are arranged in a feather-like fashion. Here we have short fascicles that are arranged obliquely to a central tendon. They may be unipinnate, that is, tendon with fascicles only on one side, or bipinnate, with fascicles on both sides of the tendon. Here you see some of the different muscle types. The circular muscle with the fascicles going around. The convergent muscle, here all the fascicles are converging on this one point, this one tendon. Here you have your 2 types of parallel, either the strap-like muscle or the fusiform muscle, but the muscle fibers are still running parallel. And then here you have your various pinnate muscles, that central tendon and fascicles attached to that tendon all down the side. Here is bipinnate with fascicles attached on both sides of the tendon. And multipinnate, here we have several tendons that go out, but each tendon has its own set of fascicles attached to it. The fascicle arrangement will contribute to the range of motion the muscle can produce, as well as the power of the muscle. Those longer, more parallel patterns can shorten more. They're not as powerful, but they can give whatever bones they're attached to the greatest range of motion. Your pinnate kinds of muscles. Here you have a large number of muscle cells that results in more power, but you don't have as much range of motion. The other thing that contributes to force and speed of contraction is the type of lever system that's being used. Now, a lever is a rigid bar that moves on a fixed point when force is applied to it. In the skeletal system, your bones are that rigid bar. They're the lever. The fulcrum is the fixed point. This is the point that's going to be the balance point. Your joints are the fulcrum in the skeletal system. Muscles, when they contract, are going to apply the force. This is going to be the effort that's applied to move something. And the load is going to be the resistance to the effort. You're going to be trying to move something. It may just be the bone and the overlying tissue, or it may be something that you're trying to move, like a book you're trying to lift. Power levers have what we call mechanical advantage. Here the load is very close to the fulcrum. The effort is applied at some distance from the fulcrum. This means that minimum effort will give you maximum movement. This provides slower movement, but it's a more stable movement. The reason that you can eventually lift a several-ton car with a jack is because it's a power type of lever. You have to pump the jack handle a lot of times to get the car to move even an inch or two off the ground. Speed levers have what's called mechanical disadvantage. Here the load is very far from the fulcrum, and the effort is applied nearer to the fulcrum. The muscle has to exert more effort to move this load. This is why it's mechanical disadvantage. You have to use more force to move the load. This is very fast and you have good range of motion, but it takes more effort. Here the example is shoveling dirt. The fulcrum is back here where you're holding onto the shovel. You exert effort in the middle of the shovel handle, and your load is out here on the end of the shovel. There are three classes of levers. First class levers are a mix of both power and speed. This is like a seesaw. Effort is applied at one end, the load is at the other end, and the fulcrum is in between the effort and the load. This is the kind of lever that seesaws and scissors have. In the body, an example is lifting the head off the chest. So here the load is the weight of your head. The effort is exerted by your neck muscles. And the fulcrum is the joint between the occipital bone and the atlas. So you've got load, effort, and the fulcrum in between. Second class levers are power levers. Here effort is applied at one end and the fulcrum is at the other end. So the load is in the middle. Wheelbarrow is an example of this. Your effort is at the handles, the load is in the wheelbarrow, and your fulcrum is down here at the wheel of the wheelbarrow. There are not very many examples of this in the body, but one example is standing on tiptoes. Here, the fulcrum is going to be the joints between the phalanges and the metatarsals. Your load is the weight of your entire body, and the effort is exerted primarily by your gastrocnemius muscle. This is a very powerful type of lever because you lift the weight of your entire body. Third class levers are speed levers. Here the effort is applied between the fulcrum and the load. So the load is on one end, fulcrum on the other, and we apply the effort in between the two. Tweezers. This is an example of a third class lever. The fulcrum is here where the tweezers come together. You pinch the tweezers in the middle, and the load is whatever you're trying to pick up with the tweezers. The other example is the biceps, lifting an object with your arm. This is the most common type of lever found in the body. And here you see the biceps working. The fulcrum is the elbow joint. The muscle crosses the elbow joint, so the effort is applied right there. And the load is whatever you're trying to lift. It could just be your hand or it could be something in your hand, like this barbell. As we compare muscle activity with relationship to the lever system, we have speed levers. These are the third class levers. These have less force, so they have mechanical disadvantage. It takes more effort to move the load. They do have more speed and they have the greatest range of motion. The power levers are the second class levers. Here, strength is a priority. These display mechanical advantage. They're more stable, but they do act slower.